welcome to another edition actually of Addiction Talk. I'm your host, Joyce Sutton, and tonight we have another special guest for us. And we wanted to have this particular guest on not only because she's fabulous and is going to be so candid about her story to recovery, but also because it's Pride Month. And this is an opportunity to share diverse stories. So we are really excited to have Eureka O'Hara on the show tonight. Take a listen. Eureka O'Hara is most known for competing in seasons 9 and 10 of RuPaul's Drag Race, season 6 of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars, and HBO's Emmy-winning series We're Here. The reality TV personality and trans advocate has been open about many aspects of her life, including her gender journey and struggles with her mental health and addiction. Eureka even publicly announced she was going to rehab in February of 2022. Today, she's celebrating more than a year in sobriety and has fully embraced her trans identity. Addiction Talk starts now. And we are happy to welcome Eureka to the show tonight. Where are you joining us from?
So I am currently residing in Vegas because I've been doing the RuPaul's Drag Race live show here at the Flamingo Casino. But, I'll always call home LA and East Tennessee.
Well, hey, we're in Nashville. That's where I am. So we're not too far away. So we love that you call Tennessee.
Yes, honey. The good old TM.
Well, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on the show is because your story will touch a lot of people. And first, I want to thank you for being willing to share your story, because I know it's not always easy to talk about when you struggled with mental health or addiction, but we really want people to see that there's someone out there that looks like them, that's maybe gone through the same experiences. So I know your story tonight is going to be life-changing for someone. So first, I want to kind of start off. Well, we are glad to have you. Well, first, I wanted to start off and just ask you, many of us saw you on RuPaul's Drag Race, and we saw you competing in seasons 9 and 10 and all of that. But what was really going on during that time? I know we saw this public persona, lots of personality, you just light up the stage. But behind closed doors, what was the public persona versus the private persona of what you were dealing with during those times?
Yeah, honestly, my life changed pretty hectically after season 9 because I, injured my knee. I went back home to have surgery. And then shortly after, my partner and I got addicted to pain pills because of it and forcing myself to work. That's just being transparent. I haven't actually talked a lot about the real start of where my rooted addiction kind of began. I definitely had some sort of an addictive personality most of my life, built off of childhood traumas and rejection and so many things that I've now learned through therapy and this process. But yeah, I think that's whenever I first can say, okay, I remember that this being a problem or something being a problem. It just kind of ended up trickling into drinking and being over social, but then over partying. And then when my mother got sick, it was trying to handle the emotions of traveling and being gone all the time. But then I, was paying my sister to take care of her back home in Tennessee. She had throat cancer, going through chemo. And anyone that has had anyone in their lives that has dealt with cancer can know how just traumatizing those treatments are and how rough it is, and seeing my mother, her name was Eureka. That's where I got my name. And I was named after my father originally. Legally was a junior, my dead name. But I wanted to be named after my mother because she was just such a strong, powerful woman. And my father was very abusive. And when me and my twin sister were 1, she left him. She raised 3 kids on her own. The most powerful person I ever knew. That person for me too, that stood up for me my whole life when I was outcasted most of it. Until probably high school, when I learned that the more successful and the more funny and the more likable you are, then the better off you are, regardless of how queer you are or whatever in East Tennessee. And play sports. That's always a good one. But yeah, just seeing her so weak, and then obviously her passing away, it really just took a lot out of my spirit and my soul and my drive. And it just really, I think that's whenever I really kind of fell deep into the like West Hollywood party scene, and it was just so convenient. And then working the industry and the nightclubs, and being Eureka O'Hara, the drag queen that everyone wants to hang out with, and of course the partiers, the drug dealers and everything else, are wanting to buy you drinks or give you free bumps or whatever the case may be that night of the week. And I think that that's a part of nightlife culture, obviously, that we deal with a lot. So I mean, I think those are all the things that I was kind of dealing with in between it all, and obviously, like, while I was shooting, I've never been one to like party and work, so there's oftentimes like, obviously you go to film Drag Race, and if you don't have like the alcohol that you're used to drinking consistently, or if you're used to having a little upper here and there, or whatever the case may be, all of a sudden you don't have that anymore either. So you're under this like microscopic situation that's very high tense and stressful. But then also, you don't have you don't have several ways to like release, right? Whether it's, sexually, drinking, eating, whatever the case may be. So I don't know. That's probably made it definitely a lot more intense and stressful. But season 10 for me, I was on a mission, honey. My mom was sick. I had something to prove to her, and wanted her to see me succeed, and like obviously help financially. So I was just like, it didn't matter what I was going through, girl. I was going to get to that crown one way or another. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can understand that. And one of the things that we know is that mental health and addiction go hand in hand often. So when I hear you talk about the childhood trauma, I've understood that you dealt with bullying just because of who you were trying to identify with and finding yourself and all of that, and how society, viewed different things. So having all those struggles, and then the love of your life, your mom, going through a really difficult season, losing your mom. I can only imagine. I lost my father to cancer, so I know how just watching them go through that process can be, and finding ways to cope, with that. So how soon into the party scene and dealing with your mom's death and all of this and realizing all the things that you've gone into your life, did you realize that you were struggling with an addiction? When did that hit you?
Well, it didn't really hit me until probably it was really honestly right after my grandmother passed away. Like, so a year or two later after my mother passed away, my grandmother passed away. And then that was like my other person. The two people that were there for me my entire life, even when my mother didn't understand me, was my grandmother. I'll never forget, in the middle of the night, I would sneak and watch Queer as Folk on the TV. And then one day I'm like helping my grandmother like sift through her music boxes. And she's like, why don't we watch that Queer as Folk show you watch all the time? And I was like, Granny, no, oh my gosh, I would never. And she was like, it's okay. And she gave me that moment of like, it's okay, be who you are. And she had a friend, and she, this is not appropriate, but she called her he, she friend, but she was a trans woman that was one of her best friends that would come over and sat with her, and they would paint nails. And, so I just always had that with her. So then losing her too, it just kind of like broke something off in my spirit maybe. And I just got a little careless. It's weird because like as I realized it was a problem when when I felt invincible with it. It was weird.
That's interesting.
And honestly, self-destructive. Like I could tell it was becoming more self-destructive, almost on purpose. Like I was wanting to punish myself. So I was also like, didn't care if people saw it publicly, or you know what I mean? Like, well, I don't care, F that, or that. It started changing the root of who I am and how I respond to things and how I talk and how I treat myself and how I treat people. And I think that's when you realize that you're caught by the addiction disease, is because it truly does change who you are. And people commonly
did people start to know?
Oh, people noticed for sure. Yeah, I mean, if they would have to be blind not to, you know what I mean? And of course, I had friends and people coming to me, wondering like, is everything okay? What's going on? And because I am such a big, in self control, like type personality, people aren't normally used to seeing me derail. So I think it was also
Mm.
hard for a lot of even my closer friends to like, okay, how do I approach this person about this too without it being, because honestly, when you're trying to talk to an addict, it's virtually impossible to get them to comprehend or even understand what you're saying. And it's very defensive. I remember the first couple times I had people coming to me, I was very like argumentative. I at one point, like because someone tried to help me, I like up and moved, you know, out of where I was
Whoa.
staying because I was like, y'all are just jealous and you hate me and blah blah blah. And it's all these thoughts that the addiction puts in your mind and makes you believe, and which I call it the demons getting in. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like it's very almost, and I'm not everyone's a very religious person, but it feels very possessed in a way sometimes. Like
Mm.
when you're in that state of mind, that addiction, manic, state, it feels like someone else or something else is in control almost because it's not me. You know what I mean? It's obviously a darker, much deeper part of like maybe where the pain comes from and who I am, but it's not who I am, and that's when I think I started realizing the most like, okay, something's really wrong here. You know what I mean? I
Was there
wasn't,
like a rock bottom moment?
well, I
Was there
think it
like a
was
rock bottom
something,
moment where you're like, I know you said you started to see this kind of, you weren't yourself. You're like, I can tell I'm not myself. But can
yeah.
you remember if there was something like a light bulb or something that happened that said enough is enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's it was several it was several rock bottom moments. I think in addiction, that are like it's just those moments when you realize like it's the next day when you're thinking back on some or on the things you said to the people you love the most. You know, it's the
Ooh.
moments that you're laying there with yourself, no longer inebriated, and you have to deal with what you did in this state the night before. You know what I mean? When you drink too
Mm.
much or whatever your drug of choice is. I'm not here to judge because I've been in every meeting room because I like to go to all meetings, whether it's CMA, which is Crystal Meth Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. I go to AA. I've been to gambling A or GA or something like that. I forget what it's called, but I like to go to all meetings because I feel like addiction is addiction regardless. It's that same demon we all fight with. So I don't judge. I think it's more of like, what are we trying to numb ourselves from? Because that's ideally what it
Mm.
is it's you hiding. That's what I think addiction is it's you're so terrified and fearful of either something that's happened or is going to happen, that you numb it out. And it's a scary place to be because you do lose control. I think some other rock bottom moments is I was actually performing here in Drag Race Live, and I could just see myself. The way I was feeling when I would wake up is I was pushing my body too far, and I could feel it in like the back pain and the sluggishness, and I just didn't. I felt drained, but I was still pushing myself. And then I think when I finally went to the doctor to get a checkup, I had like a urinary tract infection, a lung infection. I was dehydrated. Like I had like several like muscle spasm issues happening in my back where I was overextended. Like, I just wasn't taking good care of myself either. And that was another thing that like kind of was like, oh wait, hold on, you know. But then truthfully, like it was also like this, to be honest, a lot of my
Mhm.
real that I didn't want to continue going down this path was my success, and drag and the work that I've put into what I've been able to accomplish. And obviously, well, more so specifically, my work on We're Here too. Like I getting to look back on that and seeing the people that were going to be affected if I kept going down this road, too. And it was just one of those things where it's like, I've worked so hard to get where I am. I mean, even now, but then too, especially, I mean, I've been blessed to already have some of my dreams come true. Not a lot of people can say that. You know what I mean? I can say here
Right.
truthfully and say It was a dream come true for me to be on RuPaul's Drag Race. A dream come true for me to have a show around small community queer living incorporated with drag, where I got to co-host alongside two of my favorite drag queens of all time on RuPaul's Drag Race on the movie channel, which is what my mama would call it. The HBO was always, girl, we can't afford the movie channels. You know what I'm saying? So those were dreams coming true. So like, was I going to destroy that? Was I going to allow myself to destroy myself? And there's a moment where I think you like get in your headspace and you're like, you know what? I can either continue being afraid of the rest of the world and fight only in here and be too prideful to admit that I need help, be too afraid that, like, it's weird because, like, I was so scared that if someone found out that I wasn't perfect, that I was going to lose everything. Oh, that's real. Ooh. But what was going to make me lose everything?
That's deep. That's deep.
Right. What was going to make me lose everything was pretending like I was perfect when everything was wrong in my head, And can't nobody connect with you when you're not being
real. And what
were
the things that you were battling in your head, Eureka? What were the things that you felt like you were battling at that time?
I mean, the biggest thing is like, it's a lot of it comes from self-worth issues. When you deal with like childhood traumas and you deal with feeling alienated and rejected your whole life, and it's a lot of it was the abuse I got from my father. I was his son, and I was a junior to him, and I was a junior, so I was named after him. I was his only son, and there was this pressure put on me being from East Tennessee and being the man of the house and being a boy and how tough I was supposed to be and all these things. And I was never good enough my whole life. It was like, it was F word this, F word that, sissy this, sissy that. Why are you wearing that FAGGO t-shirt and your hair like that and this like that? And it was just, I couldn't do anything right my whole life. And it wasn't just him, it was my peers. And I was always the bigger kid too. So then there was that. And I was 6 foot in 8th grade. And my mom's full German. So I was always just so much bigger than everyone else. So then on top of it, there was always this battle with guys too in school because I was like the big one to take down. And I'm over here like, I don't want to take it down. You know what I mean? So it was just like, I was pushed to the brink a lot growing up. And then my sister was very abusive, my older sister and her friends, because they wanted to toughen me up. And it's all these things that I'm now trying to bring awareness to and fight against by being proactive with drag representation and trans representation, because I could have saved a lot of this if I would have had the support and love that some of these children have now, like some of the trans support even that is being fought against. Being able to see drag. When I finally found drag, I found a place where I could just express myself and show that femininity that I was literally beat for growing up. Like if I let that out, I got my ass whooped. Excuse my language. I'm so sorry. But that's how they talk in East Tennessee. You know what I'm saying? You don't just get a whipping. You know what I mean? You get your ass whooped, get the paddle and kind of carry on. And my dad was an addict. I know now as I've like been through my own recovery that he was very much an addict. And I know a lot of the abuse that I received from him was him addicted and inebriated. And, he's in prison now, and he's been there for like 8 or 9 years, I think. I don't know. It's been a while, but he's definitely a different headspace now. So we do communicate some, but even that's still hard for me, but also realizing that my mother was an addict, she was a marijuana smoker, but she had her other afflictions as well. And just looking back on it, I'm like, wow, no wonder it's, maybe it's not.
No wonder,
Huh?
No, Eureka, when I think about that, that was a lot. You're dealing with, how people are perceiving you, the abuse that you had, having 2 people in your family who were struggling. And we know addiction can run in families as well. So just everything that was on you. But I want to commend you because even as you found yourself in that state, you got help. You went to rehab. So That's huge. So what
Yeah,
was that
I
like
remember
to make that phone call to say, I'm gonna change this?
it was terrifying. Well, I mean, well, I mean, it was terrifying. I had thought about it for probably a while. Like I had thought about making that call several times, but I always talked myself out of it because it was that very like that voice in the back of your head, which is the addiction talking. It develops its own, personality back there. Um, and one thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if I got it out. There's a common misconception that when people are inebriated, their true selves come out. That's not true.
Mm.
Randomly, it is literally you. It's the person that you're the most fearful of ever becoming is what comes out when you're addicted. The person that you become is what you are the most terrified of. Is so crazy.
Ooh. And
So
for
if you're
you, was
terrified
drug
of
of
losing
choice
control,
alcohol?
huh?
For you, Eureka, was the drug of choice primarily alcohol, or were you trying other things as well?
No, it was alcohol and ketamine and cocaine and shrooms and you know what I mean? It was girl, I'm just gonna be honest, it's the queer party scene. And in the LGBTQ community, we are all and I've been in those situations, those after hour parties and things like that, where I sit there and I see my people. And I'm so blessed and honored that I got to experience those times with those people because there is so much necessity in those moments. And even in that release, although it's not the healthiest thing in the world, I'm not going to say it's okay to do drugs, but I understand it. You know what I mean? I don't judge it as harshly as I would have before because being in those situations, I see these people that, they live, and needless to say, a very fake life to survive most of the time, to cater to heteronormative culture, cisgender men, women, whatever the case may be, to play their queer parts for the world so that they can survive. And, they're all dealing with religion trauma, rejection, family abuse, all these things that are embedded in us as queer people that cause a lot of mental issues. And the only way sometimes to release is just to numb it out. And in those environments, it does sound like a lot, but it is a huge part of our culture. But in those environments, people don't notice as not saying drug dealers are amazing, but usually in these environments, it's a controlled situation. You're getting the best of the best most of the time. If you know it's there are people that watch out for you. It's almost its own culture. It becomes your friend group for a moment. It becomes people that do help you survive. Obviously, you're all not really surviving very well together, but you know what I'm saying? That
Right,
like
like you said, it's
if
this
something
coping
happens,
mechanism.
right? But if something happens,
No, but
one of
what I
your
love
friends
that you
is
said.
back. They know what to do. So it's I
Right.
don't know. I just hate. I don't like ragging on all of the situations and the environments and groups that I was a part of because I really met a lot of really amazing and beautiful people and saw a lot of incredible spirit and energy in people, and I just understand maybe differently than some. But I don't know if I got off topic from what you were trying to talk
No,
about.
Eureka, you're giving us so many golden nuggets. I mean, there's so many things you share that I know people are going to be able to relate to or understand or empathize with. But one of the things that I thought was really powerful about what you said is that you found that there was another way by going to rehab,
Oh yes,
that you
yes, we
didn't
have.
have to. Yes, we're talking about rehab, but you found there was another way. So what did you learn? What was
Yes.
the biggest aha
Mm.
moment for you in rehab?
Oh my goodness, it just the aha moment was the first call even. Like I called probably I called two people that were influential people in my lives. And I'll just be honest, it was the creators of We're Here. I called them because I knew that they would, Steven and Johnny both they were hoping and praying because they checked on me a couple times too. And I knew that they would make sure that I was taken care of regardless of anything else. They wouldn't care. There'd be no questions asked, and they did. And I went to Cirque Lodge. I don't know if I'm supposed to say all the details, and it was an incredible rehab. It was really hard though at first because I entered in as a non-binary person. That's what I was the most afraid of. Was like, am I going to be forced to be with just men? Am I going to, these were my questions going in, right? Am I going to be forced to, do therapy with only men, not feel like I can relate? With it being, it was in Utah, of all places as well, with it being in an area that's probably religious and this and that. Am I going to be dealing with like white cis men that, are middle class and above, which they were, and I would be the spectacle. And in some cases, yes, I was the spectacle, but I was, I think the
But did
aha
you
moment.
find yourself there?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is the aha moment was like having to stand up for myself in that environment and realizing like that I belonged there, and more than just for my addiction, but like this was another part of my life destiny path to explore this, to understand that like queer people go through this. And I'm the type of person where I'm not afraid to talk about how I feel and be honest with people, regardless of, I'm not afraid to be confrontational if I have to be. I guess what I'm saying. So I went straight into the organizer's office and I was like, listen, this does not work for me. One of the gentlemen in the facilities kept misgendering me in group therapy. And I corrected him and he got an attitude. And then he like got everyone else's approval in a way of the group to like almost rub me off like I was being ridiculous about how I felt. So I let it go. Well, after the meeting, he stopped me and he tried to apologize. And I was like, it's okay. We're moving on. I don't need your apology. I apologize to you for not giving you the acceptance of your apology because I don't accept it, but I'm going to continue at A. It's no big deal. And in the front of the group later, he brought up that he apologized to me and that I didn't accept it. And it was just like,
that must have been huge.
Huh? Oh,
that must have been huge for you.
What was calculated, it was him, like, and so I went to the higher ups. I was just like, listen, this is what queer people, trans individuals, all these people have issues with in these environments, in these places, in this environment, and they're afraid to come get help because they're mistreated and they're shrugged off by their feelings. These are my feelings. This is how I feel and how comfortable I feel. I'm not calling them by a different name than they go by. I'm just asking you all to respect how I want to identify. And this is what, and I was able to talk, and they were able to learn something from me. And then, and of course, I called him out when he called me out in front of the group. I was just like, just so you know, that's really rude. We spoke about this separately, and you're just wanting the acceptance of everyone else in this group because I didn't give you the acceptance that you were deserving, and at least you thought that you deserved, But it made me realize, like, I am ready to stand up for myself. The more sober I got, the more clear-headed I got. I was like, oh my God, not only have I been trying to numb out, like, the traumas that I'm going through, but maybe I was almost holding on to those because more and more I realized like I would start putting more makeup on every day. I had my makeup with me because I would do makeup as non-binary, and just throughout that journey, I would just keep doing more and more makeup, feeling more feminine, feeling more naturally myself. And then, coming out of it and working on We're Here and working with a couple of really incredible trans individuals, I just realized it really did. It just helped me realize who I was and how much the numbness was also for me to cover up this idea of contentment, right? Even now, like as I transition, I'm not as passable as what we call it in the trans community. We call it passable, which is basically, passable under the radar. Like you're passable as what society sees as a visible woman. So that way people don't misgender you, and they treat you as such more naturally versus needing to be educated, So as I journey towards being more passable, or like trying to have more feminine features because I'm tall, or like needing my body work done or my hormones or this or that, I have found a lot of strength from knowing that I don't need to be numbed out to be able to be myself. And I don't need to, I don't know. It's just, I think that was the biggest thing. Sorry, I can ramble
It sounds
little bit sometimes.
No, but Eureka, that sounds so powerful to finally go through rehab and just feel like you can embrace you and be okay with you, regardless of what other people think, regardless of other people's opinion. And being able to do that had to be kind of empowering. I can only imagine how you left
you left when you felt how you felt when you left treatment.
Well, leaving treatment, I was nervous, but I was excited, just to see how I would handle the outside world. But I have to say, like, I was so blessed to go into working with We're Here and having that support system at work. And honestly, I have to say it wasn't just rehab, but it was also having, one is when you finally decide to ask for help and be honest about where you are, then people know where to meet you. You know what I mean? Like, but we'll set in our
What do you mean by
loneliness.
that? Explain that a little.
Yeah, well, people will meet you where you're at. People will they'll know where you are to know how to come to you, to check on you, to talk to you, what you might need. You have to speak up for yourself. Very often when we are in our addiction at the worst moments, we get very isolated and we hide and we're afraid to tell people. And this is not even addicted people. This is people that deal with mental issues, depression, anxiety, all the above. We hide ourselves and our truths from people thinking that they will not like us for it. But the reality is they already see it happening. So when we deny it and try to pretend, people don't know how to approach and how to help. So then you just end up ruining relationships, or they have to distance themselves because they don't know what to do for you. But when you allow yourself to open up to people, then they know where to meet you. And with We're Here, especially, Bob and Shangela are my sisters. I felt so supported there. The allies on the staff, to the cameraman, to the director, to the creators, like, I just knew it was my moment to like feel safe enough to come out again. And I was in a sober environment for myself too. I was very safe there. They made sure that I had my, kept my routine meetings up as far as my outpatient therapy. And, I was just really so blessed to be taken care of by such a queer family. And I think that's what is so special in our queer communities. We do have these pockets of family that we create. And one of the biggest things I want to try to be more honest about is breaking the stigma of asking for help and admitting that you have a problem with addiction, or that you're going through a dark time and maybe using or drinking or doing, being unhealthy for yourself. And it's sad that like there is still such a stigma in our community that's like, once you are marked an addict, you're an addict forever. But that's the truth. I will always
Now, let me ask you this. You said, Eureka, something really powerful there. You said you felt like even with admitting that you had struggled with addiction, it was like coming out. How would you say that felt compared to being out in the world with your identity as a trans woman? Was it harder? Was it similar? How would you compare those two journeys, considering they both come often with stigma?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, they're both rough, but I think that anytime you decide to open yourself up to peer judgment, you're putting yourself at risk of having to hear what other people have to say, But at the same time, you're freeing yourself from feeling like an imposter, from feeling like you're lying all the time. I don't want to lie anymore. I got tired of lying and pretending. And it wasn't like, I just got tired of pretending like everything was always okay when it wasn't, And I think that comes from, through addiction, you lose a lot of your self-confidence. You think that you're a more confident person when you're inebriated, but really you're just a mess. And you're, irresponsible with how you push your narratives or that confidence, right? Or it's just overly confident to a place of arrogance and messiness. But there's no real self-control. And I think that's another thing, is that we forget that, like, and I'm not trying to push again religion on anyone, but we talk about higher power in recovery. And that higher power can be anything you want it to be. It can be the group, they say. So it can be that circle that you're talking to. It can be, my higher power I look to before refinding my faith as a goddess. And it was my mother and my grandmother who were the angels watching over me just because they were gone, but also my sister's mom, my drag mother's mom, these other amazing women, that Lady Red, Chi Chi DeVane, these people that I had great connection with that I know are no longer here. Those were my higher power to get through it. But it's about understanding that we are not the end all be all individually, that there is something greater than ourselves. And so that means that we truthfully cannot predict the future. We cannot control how everything is going to happen. The only thing that you get is the decision that you're making in that moment right there. That's all you get. Because you can try to pre-plan for everything to go a certain way, but it will never go exactly as you want. So it's just about taking the step each moment.
Yeah, and that's what they say about in recovery. It's one day at a time. So how would you describe your life in recovery, Eureka? Because first of all, you're in Las Vegas, which I can imagine has its own challenges, as someone who's sober in recovery. But how would you describe it? How do you get through every day?
I mean, honestly, you have a support system. To be honest, I think that is what I've learned the most is when I first came into like the AA meetings and the meeting environment, it was just, I was one of the, excuse me. Oh my goodness. I apologize. It was one of those things where I felt like it was very culty. I was making every excuse I could to like be against it. And the truth is that is your addiction talking, because it can sense something good for you is lurking around the corner. And that is why I will always be in recovery, because I will always have that little menace that thinks that, oh, you're just being rebellious. You're just living life. You're just letting your hair down. No, you're trying to creep in because you are some overly developed traumatic insecurity that I will always carry with me. No matter how much work I do on myself, all the work I do on myself is just going to remind me how to fight you every day.
And how do you fight? How do you fight her every day? Is it through
it's by going into those
words?
Yeah, it's by going into the meetings. It's by being honest with those peers. Being honest with the people that know you and know you're full of, if you're full of, those are the areas where you can truly talk about the reality of everything that happened to you with anonymity. And then also I have 2 books that I still have from rehab. One is The Languages of Letting Go, and the other one is Keep It Simple. And there's just daily readings. I read it every day. My sister, her husband, and my assistant live in this house in Vegas with me right now. And I make them listen to it too. I'm like, keep it simple. And I read it, and Languages of Letting Go, read it. And we all benefit from it, so it's things like that. Meditation is really important, but also it is just that it's the reminder. Also being medicated. I'm not going to lie. Therapy and medication. If you are struggling with mental illness, stop fighting the idea that you might need to be medicated, because you might be. And if you're already an addict, then don't tell me it's because you don't want to take no pills or something. Excuse my language, or excuse my, humor around it. But don't say, well, you never know what's in them pills, or girl, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're willing to,
you gotta do what you have to do to get well.
Yeah, and it's about trust the people that have put in the work and put in the education to know what they're doing. But it's especially therapy. Find someone that you can talk to that's not directly related to the conversation. We have amazing friends and family that we can talk and vent to, but when we unload so much, we still carry some of that burden that we put so much on them. And there's still a worry there. Girl, just pay somebody to take it on. You know what I mean? Pay somebody to listen to you blab and give you some good advice. You know what I'm saying? So it's just learning how to let go of the shame and the fear of everything too, which is like, if you think that you're going to be ashamed telling your friend all these crazy stories, then go to therapy and tell someone that's not directly related to your life all of these stories and get through them, at least the conversation. Also, like, this is another thing in recovery, there's going to be relapses. There's going to be tough times. There's going to be moments where you want to party more than anything. You need to call a sober friend or just a friend and vent. Do it, Don't be afraid to admit that you're struggling. That's okay. Like, I think that's the one thing that you have to learn from recovery more than anything is being willing to understand that we're not perfect, that we don't have control, that it's not about self-will. It's about our higher power's will. It's about the path. It's also about being honest. you know. So I
That's
think
so
that's
good.
it. Yeah.
You've given us so many golden nuggets, Eureka. I could write a book just from all the stuff that you said. But you
Girl,
know
I
what?
promise you right something.
I know. I mean, just your experience and your wisdom through this journey. And so when somebody's hearing your story, especially someone in the community, you know, who's struggling, what do you hope they walk away with? What would be that message that you hope resonates with someone who's struggling right now, particularly someone who may be trans or in the queer community who hears your story tonight?
Yeah, you don't have to be okay. It is 100% okay not to be okay. And everything happening in our social society, down to legislation, all the way up to whatever you might be going through personally, your feelings are 100% valid. The space you take up in this world is not taking away from anybody else. And you don't have to do anything. The truth is, you do not have to do anything you don't want to do. You just have to deal with the consequences if you don't. And you have to weigh the options of what consequence is worse. Or sometimes make those moves that are strictly for yourself, and not for anybody else. Because you can find recovery for a loved one. You can find recovery for a job. You can find recovery because I don't want to be broke like this anymore. But until you find recovery for yourself, you'll never do it the right way. That's just the truth.
That's it. And what word, as we wrap up, Eureka, first we want to hear what's going on with you next, but what would one word be to describe how much better you feel in recovery? If you could describe that word for somebody.
Free.
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 I love it.
And it almost 3 words, free of fear. To be honest, it's the fear. You can't be free with all that fear, honey.
So you are free and doing your thing. So what's next, Eureka? How can we see what projects do you have going on? How can we stay in contact with your recovery journey?
Well, thank you, Joy. I appreciate it. You can stay up on any socials at Eureka O'Hara, EUREKAOHARA. I'm very blessed that I got all those handles immediately. Second, I'm just, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm performing. I'm hopefully going to do, some one-woman show stuff. I have a million TV ideas and podcasts. I have a million one things I want to do. And it's just going to depend on where the universe takes me next. Obviously, continuing to put all the love and work and hard energy into We're Here as it goes into filming at season 4 later in the year. And I just want to give a shout out for Swiping America, a new show on Max, produced and created by Johnny and Stephen Warren. It's a really gorgeous, queer, inclusive, more real world life dating type show. So y'all definitely check that out. And yeah, I mean, for me, I'll be at RuPaul's Drag Race live occasionally. You could definitely catch me in many a Jack in the Box drive-through for them egg rolls. And if you go to recovery meetings in LA or Vegas, hopefully you'll see me soon. And don't be afraid to drop me a DM if you see me in a city near you and you want to invite me to your meeting. I would love to come.
Oh, I love that. Connecting with people. I think that's huge. Connecting to people and sharing your story. Thank you so much, Eureka, for being so transparent with us tonight and sharing your story. I know it touched someone. So thank you. And thank you all for listening. And that's going to do it for another episode of Addiction Talk. Good night.